We are not going to go down rabbit holes. Going down rabbit holes is exactly how you get fucked doing this. And so for those of you with a hard science background, reading a paper like your favorite Twilight insect / fic Kitazen novel, 50 Shades of Kitazen is a terrible idea. Like, you should not just like sit down and try to read through a paper. So
It was so beautiful.
Say what?
But it was so beautiful.
It was so beautiful. Yes, exactly. This is how you get hurt. So what we're going to do here is we're going to. So I made an infographic of how to read the paper. Okay. So this is the abstract, and this is the conclusion, and this is where I start to talk about why this paper is a wonderful learning experience, but it's also like absolute shite. So we're going to do the abstract and the conclusion, and then we're going to read the bones of the paper. This paper sucks. Its supplemental material is awesome, but this paper is actually just like garbage. So, the abstract, the head of the paper. It's supposed to be a story. Like, the abstract is about 300 to 350 words, and it's supposed to tell us a story about what they wanted. And so that's the first thing that they talk about. They're like, hey, this thing is pretty goddamn neat. That's the first sentence. The next sentence is, but it's not neat in the way that we do it, which is like a lot of bioengineering papers, because usually most bioengineering processes are actually like not great for the environment, which is kind of weird, right? And then at this point, they were supposed to say, here's what we did, and then this is why it's cool. And they kind of like flopped on the last half of that. So if anybody read the abstract and was like, hey, I don't get what they're trying to say, don't worry, it's not your fault. It's actually just a crappy abstract. I actually don't know how this got published, but whatever. Again, like I said, the supplementary material is pretty dope. So then the paper is normally broken into there's an introduction, which they did. They're like, hey, we're trying to do this thing. And then there's a materials section. This is what we did the thing with. And then there's a methods section, which traditionally is actually kind of amorphous because everybody's trying to be very sneaky about what they're doing. And so methods sections suck. Again, this is why the supplementary material saves this paper from being total garbage. But so they just they didn't break their paper into any sorts of parts. Basically, what they're trying to do is throw shade on previous work that's been done for making synthetic nacre by being like, we did it better with bacteria, and bacteria is the future. Because they just found bacteria that made all of the, if you look at the previous nacre papers, it's about making layers and then smooshing them together. And this paper is about having the bacteria shit out the layers and then kind of smoosh them together on their own. So it is technically correct, but it's not well written. And so, so we've looked at the head here, which is incomplete. It does not tell us the final end goal or the success. And that's our first instance of understanding that this is like their primary volley into trying to get into this field. So this is like a preliminary paper. They're like, this is really neat. It's very novel, but we don't have a lot of shit yet. So now we're going to go all the way down to what would be the conclusion section of the paper, except they don't actually have a conclusion section of the paper.
No,
Um, but it does start with the sentence, one key advantage of our method. And so for those of you that grew up in the very rigid schooling system of 30 decades ago America, there's a type of essay format called the TRIT format, where you have your thesis and then your reasoning, and then you have instance, 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 and then you restate your thesis. So down here, when they start with one key advantage of our method, is where they basically are just restating that they're pretty neat. And
yeah.
and they are still technically doing the things. So I mentioned this in a voice chat. Part of the conclusion section of a paper is to talk about the stuff that you're technically already working on, but you don't have enough data to make a paper on. So that if somebody does it before you, you can say, no, I already talked about that. Here it is. And so you can see that they are like talking, like if you read down here, they're like, sit at the very bottom, civil engineering for crack prevention, remediation and biocement, carbon sequestration, automotive, aerospace, industries, the production of light. They just talk forever about all the different things. And so this is the type of methodology that they use in patents as well, where they're just like, I'm going to cram everything in there so that nobody can scoop me and so that I can be outraged. Luckily, we don't care about any of that. And they did a really poor job of doing this too, so they just kind of crammed a bunch of crap into the bottom. So this is problematic. Because usually you should be able to get like a fairly functional grasp of the paper from the abstract. And they stopped halfway. And then they just reiterated, hey, we're pretty neat down at the bottom. And then there's just a big blur in the middle. And so the next thing you do is you look for the bones of the paper. And the bones of the paper are the graphics. The graphics are supposed to tell the story. Graphic 1, so that's figure 1, should be like, this is the initial thing we did. Usually, figure 2 says, this is the thing that we did after figure 1, and figure 1 is how we got to figure 2. They also decided to not do that. They decided to make figure 2 just make this bonkers mass of pictures. But the explanations in the figures are actually pretty great. And so some of the things, so I'm just going to kind of bounce around a little bit, and then we're going to go for some questions, because parts of this paper are like literally incomprehensible to people that haven't had a background in this. I mean, this is the problem with journal papers, is that they always have their own specialized language. And so if you're reading this and you're like, what the heck is polylactic glycolic acid? And it's like, well, you know what? It doesn't actually matter. It's just a word that means a thing. And this is why I told Pistachio to not run down the rabbit hole of making, yeah, I know, maybe you have a pistachio, to not run down the rabbit hole, because doing the research while you're reading the paper doesn't actually help you. You spread yourself out so thin that you're like, holy shit, I need to learn the entirety of organic chemistry right now to understand this. And it's like, you actually don't. You can just, like, so some of you are coders, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you understand the concept of foo and bar. Yes. So
Fucked up beyond all repair, or
no. You have foo, FOO, and
Okay.
bar. They're just placeholders.
variable type.
Okay. Yeah. And so a lot of these things are these like really long, complex names that, you know, you could get really excited about organic chemistry and then understand that and read that and be like, wow, I can see that picture in my head. But it doesn't actually help you with this thing. What you need is to just have a placeholder. Now, because these people are trying to be so specific, they're using the actual name, but you can totally just replace it with beep, boop, foo, bar. It doesn't actually fucking matter.
Right.
And so you can be like, the biotechnological process for industrial scale production of compounds such as polymers, foo, bar, beep, and boop, like, it still means the same thing. Like, the things still work. And so for the comprehension of the paper, if you are spending your time going off and researching and reading more and more and more and thinking so much about all of the minutia, you don't get the grand process or just like, hey, it does this. You know, it just does the thing with the foo and the bar, and you smush them together. The bacteria smushes the foo and bar together, which is really how the entirety of this paper, which is that they just talk about how the bacteria, and so it's a
They're not
it's
unbiased.
yeah, and so there's a basically it's just they use one bacteria, they make the layer like in the previous paper, they do a wash to functionalize the layer, and then they use another bacteria. That's actually the entirety of the paper. And then they just explain it a lot. But that is actually all that's going on, is that they're just doing like one bacteria wash, another bacteria wash, repeat indefinitely until it's as thick as you want it.
As far as I understand it, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I'll wait.
So that's it. I would go more into the graphics, except I'm pretty sure that some of your questions are going to be about things that I can point out in the graphics, and so it's actually going to be easier if I just let you guys talk now. Okay, but literally this is the time where you talk.
Okay, so sorry, Discord had me bumped out, but as far as I understand it, they used. I also kind of commented on I think it was the chitosan no noodle thing. Actually no, it was okay. Never mind. Basically, as far as I understand it, they use Saccharomyces pastori or. Yeah, well, Sporosaccharina pastori to kind of lay out a PMMA lattice that will aggregate calcium carbonate.
Right.
And that's and as far as I understand, that PMMA stays the same. Like they just then add PGA with and the other one
right, with the bacteria.
Yeah.
So the PMMA is it's the substrate.
Yeah.
It's the thing upon which the other things build.
Yeah.
They were a little sneaky about it, though. They did do some pre-processing before that.
Yeah, they did a lot of functionalization.
Right. Yeah, they were like, "Oh, we just did the thing," and it's like, "No, you cheated, cheaters."
Yeah. No, they didn't cheat because they put it in the supplemental material. It's just in this particular paper, they're like, "Yeah, we just like smacked a piece of PMMA in there," and it's like, no, you spent like a whole week making that PMMA like the comfiest cushion.
And then they put it in the was it the decanter? I forgot the term for it. The trapped atmosphere that allows for the precipitation of the like the chemical version of it. Do you know what I'm talking about?
So, and then they also have to, so in between every step, there's steps that are not mentioned. This is why the supplementary material is so important. And this is the type of stuff that you need to look for when you're reading a paper. You're like, okay, well, how do they get from here to there? And this is where we start putting in more foos and bars and remembering things to look for. Where we're like, okay, well, that's not how chemistry works. So maybe maybe they did something else, but this is another reason that I hate this paper, which is why we're reading it, because it's really just a terrible fucking paper. But their supplementary material is awesome.
Right.
And so it's important to learn to see in between the gaps, like the spaces in between the sentences where they're like, we did this and then we did this. And once you get enough foundation, you can see that. You can see like, and then that's where they did something else, and I got to figure this out. And especially because this paper, if you don't get the supplementary material, has no methods section. You just have to read it and then build it in your head. And I know that sucks. I'm sorry.
No,
but you have to like see the holes, and then you're like, oh, yeah. And then, so like for instance, I've been working on this project with herpes with my friend Andreas. And every lab, every place that does biology work has their own way of doing it. Even though we should have like a completely standardized set of tools and methods at this point, you just get people that are like, yeah, and then I did this thing and it worked. And you're like, oh boy, okay. And you wrote it down. Yeah, and that's how I teach everybody to do it now. And it's like, okay, God. And so Andreas and I were trying to buy hardware. And he does all of his stuff with chicken eggs. And when I was working on the initial stages of this project, I was working with DNA. And so the flasks for those things are very different, right? And so when Andreas is like, yes, and then you get a centrifuge. And I'm like, neat. And you got a centrifuge. I'm thinking about the work that I'm going to be doing on my end. I'm not thinking about his work. And so then he's like, oh, wait, why didn't you get the big centrifuge? Because I'm not working with chicken eggs, dude. So this is one of these things that like, and this is like just the curse of every single lab. When you read these papers, you have to be like, okay, but what do they do? Like, what is the thing that they're working with? What is the scale? And this is the type of thing that where this paper is actually really great, where you can kind of see the holes in it. And you're like, huh, a lot of time renaming papers. So I'm glad that you guys are helping him.
Hell yeah. I mean, it was triggering my OCD. I was like, okay, if I gotta read those paper, I need to change
it was definitely, he was freaking out. And I'm just like, how about you just like, I don't know, sit down with the computer.
Dude, I still have a fucking like 25 gigs of papers that I haven't been able to upload because there's not enough space.
Okay, you gotta mail that back to me.
No, this is mine. This is mine.
Wait, that one's yours?
Yeah.
Ah, damn it, I lost it then. God damn it. Okay, so back to the paper. Okay, people are moving, which means that we're still here. You have to.
Is Discord dying for anyone else?
Yeah, a little bit.
Choppy. Crashing.
Oh, I haven't had a crash. Okay. Does
maybe try going to browser?
Have questions about, because like one of the things about science papers is that these people are grad students for PhDs, and then So they speak in like a highly specialized language. And sometimes it is not translatable. But I'm here, your local guide, to translate some of these sentences if you have a question.
Well, I looked up most of the stuff, but one was like it's in its aragonite polymorph. I mean, it's not a polymorph. Like in its aragonite state, it's a very specific state that has like a crystal lattice structure. It's not a like it like I don't know. It was in the first I think it's like line it's like in the 21st line, it says in its aragonite polymorph, referring to, uh, there you go. Nacre is comprised of approximately 95% calcium carbonate, and it's aragonite polymorph, and it like they
That just
shouldn't
means
really.
crystal.
Yeah, but it like why like in its aragonite state, because aragonite is a crystal. It's not
Not
an aragonite.
necessarily, technically.
Okay.
Also, because it says polymorph, it doesn't necessarily just mean crystal. It means it's a crystal that's integrated with something else. And that's what
That's what. Oh, okay.
you're right. And so this
Okay,
is
I
just
get
a
it.
really fancy science term for it's a
Yeah.
crystal with other stuff.
Okay, because I get like aragonite, I get polymorphism, but I didn't understand why they included both terms in a
Because
sentence.
it
But
has
now,
because it
yeah,
has the calcium carbonate in it.
exactly. Yeah, okay. Now I get it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else?
Yeah, actually, why did they choose to go with two different forms of bacteria for the different layers?
Because one bacteria does the thing that they want. Because remember, we were talking about the multiple layers in the previous papers about how they smooshed them together. So they need a layer for attachment. They need a layer for the calcium carbonate. They need a layer for the proteins. And so each one of these bacteria makes a different layer. The calcium carbonate is like a wash layer, actually, if I'm reading the supplemental material properly. But so they need the proteins from one bacteria, and they need the chitosan from another bacteria, and then they bond through the material. So this is why they're doing, in theory, actually not in theory, based off of, let's go back to figure number 2, based off of the physical structure of how this thing is aligned, you need to have multiple layers of stuff with things in between them.
Yeah.
And that's hard. That's what gives it strength.
Yeah, exactly. And so if you had a bacteria, you could, in theory, modify a bacteria to do all the things, but it wouldn't build this. The structural modification, the actual structure of the thing, is what allows it to have its strength. So you have to have those two things together.
Yeah.
Right. But mollusks do this all day long, right?
Right, but they're like way more complicated than our chemistry understanding is.
From the paper, I liked one sentence was like, layer irregularity enabling interlocking between
Yeah.
nanoester.
Yeah, the actual flaws in biology are what allow mollusks to create this interlocking structure that gives it more strength. It's actually better because it's broken a little bit.
Yeah, it's ingenious.
Whereas we're trying to like print out sheets of things, and that is how things break.
We ain't 3D printing this shit.
Exactly.
Right.
So So why are there multiple types of bacteria? Because we need that irregularity.
Right.
Because that's how, again, look at figure 2, A and C. That is how we get that irregularity in the layers and the cat's tongue that allows them to stick together on a nano level, that allows them to hold together. Whereas if you look at, oh God, calcium carbonate over here, JKL, this is a fucking mess. Look at this. This, like, as a chemist, this looks brittle as fuck. Like, this looks like it's gonna flake all over the place. So it's the flaws in the biological system. Like, our concept of optimization and or flaw doesn't work on this level. It doesn't make sense.
Right.
So we have to do multiple things to make it work.
Also in the paper, they were specifying, like, instead of doing it by, like, layers, they were specifying it by layers of mineralization. So without actually adding that extra layer of binder, you don't even get differentiated layers. Because the binder on the bottom is what allows the crystals to reform. Otherwise, you just get, like, one solid chunk of crystal. So, like, in figure 2, you see, like, one of the nacres, which is just natural nacre. Look at the other one, and you can see the layers, and then the layers just completely disappear because they're not using any I think PGA. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's impressive. Like yeah, the fact that PGA acts as an intermediate layer, but also like very intelligible intermediate layer that I don't want to sound stupid, but it could be that they're like also facilitating the aspirators, like nanoaspirides.
That's what causes it. Yeah.
Okay, so it is nice. Okay, I didn't sound. Well, yeah.
And little tiny balls, at the end of the layers.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool, and yeah, that they're both acting as making it tougher, but also more elastic. That's
it's like just get a shit ton of sand in between all of your blocks. It's just gonna make it more frictiony.
It's a structural elasticity. It moves and retracts because of friction on a nano level, as opposed to something being stretchy. Because something being stretchy either it stretches and then stops stretching, or it snaps. And so that's the beauty of this, is that it's slightly abrasive. It's slightly abrasive, and so it mimics the properties of elasticity, but it does it on a very structural level as opposed to a chemical level.
Right. It was very counterintuitive to wrap my head around that concept. But yeah, it's marvelous.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So when you get into some of the really deep parts of chemistry, the concept, and so I talked about this on one of the live streams and about paper. And so the concept that the shape of the thing changes the way the thing interacts with the world. And so it's not just about like having a functional group or modifying it or doing anything else like that. Sometimes it's just about the actual physical structure.
Yeah. Like if you would get technical, it's about having as many redundancies as possible, like making the shape itself super redundant.
Yeah.
Or as the paper says, on the nano, micro, and macro scale.
Yeah.
Kind of cute.
All right. Other questions? Insights, thoughts, feelings?
I have the comments.
I'm curious how you plan on actually going about this, because reading through their procedures, it's like a 2-week process to make 200 micrometers. Is that what it was? Micrometers?
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
I think
so
so.
this is one. You'll notice that this structure is actually hella robust. Please refer to figure 3. 2, this is just a matter of scale. Like when you do research, you do small amounts of stuff.
All right.
So if I'm doing this in a beaker, obviously I'm only going to make a small thing. And all basic research is POC, proof of concept.
Yeah.
Whereas if I have a large object, I can make a big version of this. Does it actually work big? I have no idea. That's like kind of the fun. Like I have no idea how this is going to work.
It should probably.
Yeah, exactly. That sentence.
Yeah, it's 2 weeks to get, a very, very thin layer of the stuff.
Yeah, but that's the thing is once you have, like, for example, let's say we just let that process go for like a month and you get double the size, right? So like, let's say I'm just like, this is my full-time job. I only do this. I produce nacre. I'm a nacre farmer.
Down by the
Yeah, exactly. So if you start one like I started a batch a year ago, and then maybe I have something that's like this thick now because of it, then every single day, if I start a batch, then within the next year, I'm going to have an insane amount of nacre.
Exactly, and then you're just going to
Power
have
of exponential increase. Yeah.
Yeah, but also
So-
this process isn't as efficient as possible, technically. So you
Right,
could make it a little faster.
research. Somebody somewhere else is going to take this paper, hopefully, maybe us, and try to optimize it.
We're gonna get rich on nacre. I'm kidding, but I really want a knife, a nacre knife. That's my goal.
Sounds pretty dope. But
Yeah.
I mean, what it really comes down to is like the research is there, and yes, it's not as fast as like just thermocompressing plastic, but it also doesn't kill the entire planet. So like, I mean,
It's also quite
this
laboring.
analogy may help. Have you ever made sourdough, like a sourdough starter for baking bread before?
Huh?
What happened?
I don't know.
Oh, good.
I think Gabe died.
it's us. It's our fault. There we go. Try again.
Thanks, Ganesh.
What's it like in the afterlife?
What?
Anyways.
So, I have a few comments on possible implementations of this.
Yeah.
So basically, if we're going from like a bacterial design perspective, I don't think it would be technically possible just using one organism because you have to layer the shit. So it would mean you'd have to have like a 2-part system. And I don't know. I'm not a big fan of it as of now. However, if you use the other method with the like straight up chitin matrix, the problem is that once you have your shit, you still have to compress it down. So like technically you're still thermocompressing it, which leads to properties that aren't as good. So I'm saying maybe we take a little bit of each one, and instead of using bacterial formed argonates, there are certain methods of basically like forcing crystallization in a specific pattern using like some sort of electronic component. So if you could kind of have like your bottom layer force crystallization and then have a solution that kind of makes everything else happen around it, then in theory, if you had like one crystallization media that contained the materials that automatically caused it to form in that way, you wouldn't have to have all the other steps. You could just, but that would require finding out like a very, because even in the paper, they talk about not really knowing that much about why the crystals form in the way that they do. They're like,
that's the other thing. We actually don't understand how this works at all.
Yeah, but the thing is if you could run like if you could do a bunch of mini experiments just like and have a really controllable environment instead of using the bacteria, then you might be able to figure out why it's crystallizing in that specific method. And then once you have that, you could just scale it up. And it's going to be a lot faster because you don't have to rely on the bacterial deposition, which takes a shit ton of time.
Hi, welcome to research science.
Yeah, but also it's not, I don't like it. I don't like it.
Yeah. So the other thing is kind of like the question that you're asking, and so this is going to go weird now. The question that you're asking is, why would I grow my own tomatoes?
Why
not? Why no? Why wouldn't you grow your own tomatoes? It takes more time than going to the store to grow a tomato.
No. I just mean like.
Not you, Pistachio.
Oh, okay. Are you referring to like the other question about like the factory shit?
About how it takes time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, it takes time. Growing things takes time. That's it. Growing things takes time.
But and aside from, most of us are not really into any streamlined industrial process. We like to do things differently, but also that definitely this specific material is essentially a way out of fossil fuel. Like the fossil fuel is still like petroleum is still what makes most of our plastic right now.
It really is.
So
but it's going to be slower.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then again, you can have the process being parallel. Like, couldn't you essentially ligate both of the, once you take the PMMA, couldn't you have both sides aggregate together in a PGA? I don't know, like. You could have like, yeah, maybe, like, I don't know.
I don't know.
It seems possible.
I feel like the process is very, very new, and so there is some expedition that is possible, but also, like, we need to consider the fact that things that work well that aren't plastic are going to take more time, and that's just a thing. Like, you're just gonna. And it's just a thing. It takes 2 weeks. Yeah. Pistachio. You and I made chitosan buttons.
Yes.
Yeah. And so buttons were the first thing that were made by the plastic industry. Awesome. And if we took those chitosan buttons and we put them on a pair of pants, they would probably, I don't know, kind of wear out, melt in what, you think 5 or 6 washings? Actually, I'm ready to just throw one of them into the washing machine.
Unless you did the kite and bee shit. We haven't even tried that yet.
I know. So this means every once in a while you need to put a new button on your pants. And that might be really, really tedious, but that's the act that we take for doing something better.
Right. I mean, in Denmark, I heard that, like, some Danish news said that, hey, it costs us more to recycle our garbage than just burning it all off, and it's bad for Denmark. And he's like, yo, it's worth it in the long run. I mean, if, like,
So this is what we're looking at here. These are different methods. They're slower, like growing tomatoes as opposed to buying tomatoes. But in the long run, if you stack them, and so, Pistachio was talking about how you start a process, start a process, start a process, start a process. You stack these processes, you get something that works better in the long run because it's not fat. Because it takes time, and you took the time to stack it. And I mean, if anybody here has a research background, none of this shit is fast.
Oh no.
I'm kind of curious though, if you could not, like, say you make 2 batches, right? You get your thickness up to I don't know, however many whatevers, could you not physically stack those together with the bacterial gluing medium?
Yeah, no, yeah, that was my question, and yeah, I was thinking the same. It should
And
be
this is
possible.
where, if we go back to what should have been the comments section or the discussion section, where they're just like, yeah, we're just going to bake this for a fucking airplane. And it's like, okay, like you guys made a material that is literally 200 micrometers thick, but you're talking about airplanes.
Yeah, they're going.
Yeah, I also don't like in terms of stacking.
So they're either going for air.
Or I was gonna say, in terms of like stacking different pieces on top of each other, I think there would technically be a problem because when we talk about like the mineralization points, so like when we're making each layer, we're making a new mineralization layer, which kind of like binds everything together. So if you just took two like pieces that have already been, through their processes and tried to glue them together, either you'd have to heat press them for a really long time to cause everything to kind of come back together. Yeah.
Or we get a bacteria, another bacteria. That's the glue.
Third one.
I mean,
but it's like, oh god.
But it's still not.
Let's get another bacteria that glues them together.
It doesn't have. It's not the natural mineralization, so it's going to not be. It's still probably going to do the thing, but it's not going to be as good as building it up from the ground.
I agree. I actually agree with you. I just wanted to throw out that idea.
Yeah, I know. I can tell. I was like.
No, you are correct.
Mycelium.
Yes, yeah, and then we put some oyster mushrooms on them.
Yeah.
We train the mushrooms to hunt the cancer, Pistachio.
And then we use a neural net, and then we put it on the crypto chain, and boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, and then we use the CRISPR verified on the blockchain, and boom.
Billions in stocks.
Okay. Anywho.
So, Gabe, do you have access to the Notre Dame SEM? Okay. Interesting.
Only until May.
What happens in May? Is it separate?
Expired.
Okay. Huh. Not enough time.
Not enough time. Okay, so papers. Anyone have any more questions about this paper as opposed to spinning off into fantastical wonderlands where everything that we have is made out of mother of pearl seashells?
I don't know, but if I make a keyboard first, I'm keeping it, not sending it to you. It's mine.
Understandable.
I want a pair of shoes.
Huh.
Jordan already did that with just chitosan and paper towels.
I was just reading a thing about UCSD algae making flip-flops.
Completely different type of material.
Yeah.
Cellulose materials are a little iffy because usually they do some like crazy chemistry shit that makes them very toxic.
Yeah, they have to do like weird stuff to it.
These are like biodegrade after like 6 weeks.
Right, but it reads great, but the chemistry behind it is like, oh my god, you did the what now?
Yeah, like there's this process for making chitosan for like making foams in general, right? And it's like basically take this really, really toxic shit that breaks down water into oxygen to make your foam. And then like we were like, you could do this with chitosan, but you'd like completely fuck everything up. So instead we just kind of like put it in a chamber and waited for everything to evaporate.
Yeah. The whole point is that it's not supposed to be a big toxic mess.
Yeah. But I want a knife.
I'll make you a Kaido knife, Pistachio.
No, not Kaido knife. Nacre knife.
Nacre knife.
Nacre knife.
Okay, but what about the rest of you? Questions about paper? Don't make me do it, Jasmine.
Jasmine?
Looking at the figure 2 doesn't seem like it would be very sharp for a knife.
Everything is sharp if you
The right scale.
Mhm.
Yeah, actually, technically, the way that you kind of like shave off metal, it seems like based off of the structure, it would actually work really well for creating a point because you'd be able to shave off little blocks.
Right, because it would shave off little blocks, and then the little blocks would break and fill in the places where it wouldn't be sharp.
Yeah, shells are already sharp as fuck, so it's like
Looking at your calcium carboxate,
Pardon me.
where you're looking at like JKI, JKL, that stuff is going to fragment like a motherfucker. That's how you have a knife that explodes. I mean, who's a metalworking nerd? Any metalworking nerds?
I was a machinist for a number of years.
Cool. So ABC is Damascus. It is folded protein, bacterial protein, calcium carbonate materials that are this is your Japanese sword right here. Whereas JKL is just sand. It would make a dope knife.
Nacre knife. Imagine pulling that out of a knife fight.
Nacre is basically like nature's samurai sword. That's gonna be so dope. Okay, we're gonna have to do it.
And it's biocompatible. So when you stab someone.
So what I need to do is I need to get Justin Atkin.
Yeah.
And he's gonna talk to that guy that just makes knives out of all sorts of shit.
The world's sharpest blank knife. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's like, I make out of milk. Or whatever that garbage is. Because he's a YouTube person, so he talks with other YouTube people.
The bourgeoisie.
That's what he does. It's good. So we're going to talk with that guy, and then we're going to talk about this, and I'm pretty sure that guy will be excited about it. And we're going to make a Damascus samurai sword folded knife out of chitosan nacre.
Be insane. That'd be awesome.
I'd go for a katana first.
Okay, can we still keep working on that bioreactor for the keyboard key, though?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Anyone have any more questions about the paper? Things they don't understand?
Have you looked into the electro deposition, Gabriel? Is this a thing that you have looked into?
Yeah, no, I'm not going to do that.
But why? For why? It would be a lot more controllable.
Well, as we previously expressed, actually having a well-controlled biological deposition experiment doesn't actually get us what we want.
Well, no. I mean controllable in the fact that, like, instead of because the thing is, like, the reason that the bacterial composite, in my opinion, works good but not great is because, like, the center for the crystallization formation that they describe, they're like, we don't really know why it does this thing or that thing or whatever. So what I'm saying is, like, if we were able to determine exactly where that occurred by using something like the electrodeposition and then just mixing in a bunch of, like, random polymers that we think were also going to be in our crystallization mixture originally, then we'd be able to see like why it was doing that thing versus why it was happening when. So, like, same medias, one with bacteria, one with electrodeposition.
Build me a protocol.
Okay, yeah.
I have
other humans.
So you know the beta sheet structure in a protein? In one of my previous projects, I enhanced the anti-freeze capability of a beetle protein by basically tempering with adding an extra beta sheet, but also looking at how they were ordered. Couldn't you have the same but opposite effect, like a nucleating lattice for instead of PMMA.
Oh no, that sounds like a really great idea, actually.
Mm-hmm. I need to research a little better on
Yeah.
yeah,
but that is the lattice is A. Lattice is lattice.
Right. Awesome.
What does the nucleation part of the nucleating lattice mean? We already talked about the lattice part, but what does the nucleation
aggregation, like the aggregation center, like where things will tend to aggregate?
It's the thing where the crystal forms, usually.
That has to do with the functionalization of the lattice, usually.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we need to look into if we're going to get interested in that.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Go for it, dude.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
All right. I feel like we're out of questions.
Yeah, I mean, it was a nice little forum. I like, it was enjoyable. I liked it.
Thank you for coming to Wednesday Journal Club.
Thank you for arranging. Thank you for.
Yep. See you guys next week. Start putting your papers that you want to talk about into the Journal Club thing. Go for it. Just go.
Have to be from the library?
If it's not in the library, you should be putting it in the library.
Unless CRISPR's in the title, then burn it.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be from the library. Let's try to stick with bio and biochem, just because that's what we do here.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, go for it. Like, find something, be like, holy shit, here's this paper. It's pretty cool. Maybe I don't understand it. Maybe I do. I'm going to just go for it. Like,
damn right.
Yeah, and then throw it into the library, throw it into the Journal Club channel, make sure that it's available. And now, so to bring this all back around, the way that I kind of talked through the paper, like that abstract comments, here are the bones type of thing, remember?
Yeah.
Like, if somebody, like, I would love to not be the person that's talking the most. So if somebody else is excited about talking about a paper and they think this is just like super fucking neat, maybe we'll figure out who's gonna lead Journal Club next week. Not me.
Nope.
Maybe it'll be Pistachio, because he knows how to be smacked around a little bit. Maybe it'll be Jasmine, because she hates to talk. Yep. But so, find something, throw it out there, and let's have a conversation about it and figure out what we're going to do next.
I agree.
Cool.
Awesome. Thanks. See you guys next time.
All right.
Thank you. See you later.
Yeah.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.